Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Be My Guest. I'm your host, Eric Guest. And in today's episode, we will be discussing medication and the impacts that medication have on us, and not only us personally, but on those around us. By that I mean the family members, the friends, the partners, because ultimately medication has a very wide-reaching spread, especially in today's world, how easily accessible it is and how easily prescribed it is. It is kind of the go-to that we lean on for a lot of our emotional problems, a lot of our problems in general. The medication is almost the first solution or the first thing that's pushed out. So I'll be discussing that in large part today. This episode will be a mix of my own personal experience. It will be talking about kind of the introduction into medication and the journey that looks like once you kind of get brought into that world of mental health psychiatry and being ushered into starting your life under prescription medications, as well as some big picture commentary on kind of what the world looks like with so many people being medicated and some of the problems that we see arise, or some of the suppressionary, is that even a word? Some of the suppression things that take place with large numbers of people being medicated. So these are some of the things I'm going to touch on in this episode today. As you can see from my beautiful little medication or prescription bottle tower here, that is the gist of the episode. Why I wanted to get into medication? Well, one, it's obviously a huge portion of what psychiatry is, and mental health is. You take prescription medications, you take psychiatric medications, you take antipsychotics, antidepressant medication, anti-anxiety, whatever the medication is. There are medications for all, medications for every problem, every emotion, and every experience out there in the world. But I woke up today after this, so this is kind of interesting. I slept for 23 hours. It wasn't even last night. I woke up at probably 6 p.m. today, but I slept for 23 hours, and I took a half a pill of olanzapine, which is an antipsychotic medication. It's also used for helping sleep and whatnot. But I took a 0.25 of this medication, and I slept for 23 hours. It's like I just woke up from hibernation ultimately. And I was going about waking up out of that fog, that daze, and I said, this would be a good subject to talk about. Talk about the impacts of medication, talk about how it affects people and how some of the negative side effects really impact you, and how it ultimately can really change your world and how you are as a person. So yeah, I was walking through, I was eating some food, and I was just trying to clear the cobwebs of that long hibernation of that 23-hour sleep. So that's why today is the medication conversation. I also want to talk about maybe just some background knowledge on me a little bit, or what goes on in my world and why I'm so passionate and why I'm so invested in psychiatry and mental health. Not only due to my own experiences and my own problems, you could say, but I'm a part of a group. It's PEP. I don't know what the acronym exactly stands for. I think it's like Prevention for Psychosis. It's a group of people who have gone through psychosis, and we gather and we do different things, but it's kind of a group to be amongst your peers, be amongst people with similar experiences and who have gone through, you could say, a traumatic experience, to find solace, to find friendship, to find comfort amongst some of those people who have the similar stories, the similar experiences, and some of the similar troubles to you. So I'm in this group, and initially I didn't like going to this group. I felt it was I wanted it to be something that I would go to and I would talk and I would hear others talk and really be structured around sharing experience and talking about ways that we could better ourselves or better our lives or better the world of mental health, psychiatry, these types of things. That's really what I was looking for in this group. And I was quite frustrated that I wasn't getting that out of the group, but in so continue to go to it and find and create more meaningful friendships and talk to people just on a human level and not solely be wrapped around that we are a person with a disorder, a person with a psychiatric label, but we are people with lived experiences that we get to then be with each other and be normal. We get to be normal in whatever that looks like. We get to be more vulnerable and we can truly share and do things that maybe are looked at in a different lens, maybe a little more negative lens from outsiders, but amongst truly your peers and truly people with the same experiences, you can open up more and be a little bit more of yourself. At one of the classes this week, though, it was kind of sad, and in sharing stuff and in anything I talk about, I'll never name names. I'll only ever tell experiences or stories, but leaving out any details of other people. But a thing I overheard was someone saying that, like, I don't even know if I should share this, actually. I don't want to get people in trouble. But it was a sentiment of, like, being very depressed, very, like, suicidal, but their fear of maybe some of the consequences stopped them. And this was like, other people had a similar draw to what this person said, that emotional level of, like, not belonging or not really fitting in this world and having so many difficulties. And it was kind of sad that they, not only that they expressed this, but they expressed it so there was a lack of, like, the true impact or the true repercussions that some of those actions could have of potentially taking your life or doing something like this. And I think that's common for a lot of people who go through very traumatic things or go through the world of psychiatry and mental health, and they feel that their life may never get better, or that they feel they'll never see the light at the end of the tunnel. So they turn to the mindset or the perspective of why do I wake up? Why do I continue going out into the world? Or why do I continue trying to live my life or do things when it's better off to not even be here? That kind of thinking. And it touches me on a deep level, because obviously I've felt that way many times before, and I've truly considered that type of direction or doing severe things that you can never wake up from or never bring yourself back from. And it's sad. And in me doing a show about mental health, psychiatry, and these types of experiences, I wish to bring hope, and I wish to kind of give people a lens or a view into the life that we live and some of the experiences and the hardships that we deal with, and hopefully give hope that almost no matter how dark your life may look, how things may be stacked against you, and how little positivity you may have in your life, that you truly need to adjust and try to change your mindset to then look for something and pull yourself towards a bigger purpose or a bigger goal, because ultimately your life is worth living. Your companionship, the friendships, the family, they want you around, and to turn to the cynical, to turn to the dark side, it'll only make the process more resentful, more bitter, and not worth going out and trying to be a impactful, beneficial figure to the world. So it was kind of sad to hear some people talk like that, and to hear that sentiment, although I've expressed similar things, but it is sad. But yeah, anyways, I'm a part of this psychosis PEP group organization. So I go in there, and I like going in there and being amongst peers and friends and whatnot, and it's cool. It's cool to be around people that there's almost a freedom. We're more free in a sense. We're more liberated in a sense, that due to whatever mental health problems we have, we can express more freely. Or there's almost like a level or a barrier that's broken, or a filter that's been broken down, that allows maybe more personality or more freedom to come through, or your expressions, your opinions, your humor to come through easier, without constantly thinking about what sort of impact or what sort of opinions people might have. And I think it's kind of unique. It's kind of interesting. And honestly, I think it's kind of a superpower in that sense, that due to that liberating freedom that's the mental illness is, or whatever, that you can express yourself more freely at times, or amongst your peers. It makes it a lot easier. But that's kind of, I guess that's our introduction. But let's get into topic number 1, which is the medication journey. Some of the trial and error and fatigue that goes on with it. Because once you step into the new world, your new world that is psychiatry and mental health, and you're then dealing with the psychiatrist, and you're dealing with the medications, you're never going to be the same person or the same life that you had before. You're now always going to take medication. I've never heard of someone's experience that they start taking psychiatric medication and they then stop medication. I know it happens. I know it's rare, but you're never really told or proposed that that's a possibility. That possibility that, yeah, you may one day be able to get off medication and live a truly happy, meaningful life without the medication, that is never really there. It's always, yeah, you're going to take the medication, and no questions, no ifs, ands, or buts. That's the way of the law, and that's the way your life will then proceed. So entering the system and finding out that now that's kind of your life, you are now appointed your new label, you're appointed your new identity, and that's, you walk around now as the mentally ill schizophrenic, or the mentally ill depressive person, or the mentally ill bipolar person. So not only are you then taking and having to take medication constantly, you're also donned a new identity, and you're kind of wrapped around this identity and trying to figure out who you are now. And not only are you trying to figure out who you are, you're trying to figure out who you are with a identity put on you, essentially. And at times it can feel that you walk around and it's like a billboard over your head that says, I'm this person with this mental illness. It can truly feel that way. And I think it feels that way sometimes because there's almost no escape to the system, or no escape to the illness. You're always going in and seeing a doctor. You're always taking the medication. And then maybe you're reading about people with the same diagnosis, and you're reading their struggles, their difficulties, their negative side effects with medication. And it kind of can consume you, and it feels like that's all you are. You're not just a human anymore. You're not just a human with your own unique perspectives or your own unique abilities to provide in this world. You are the mental illness person who has to be dealt with, or has to be kind of accepted. And I don't like it. I think, and whether it just happens naturally that you turn to that, or you kind of feel that way, But I think that's kind of the accumulation of societal pressures and how the whole system kind of operates, is that coming into it and then living in it, that's kind of how you feel. So as far as the medication goes, obviously you start with one medication, or you start with maybe a handful, your brew of medications, your fun little Skittles bowl of medications you may start with. And whether they work right away, that's great. That's obviously a positive. And sometimes they're obviously not going to work. But not only is it figuring out why it's not working for you, it's then going in to the doctor or being able to express to your family and friends and those around you that, hey, I'm really having these problems. I'm really having these negative side effects. But I don't think it's the family, friends, and doctors that initially look at, hey, I think it's the medication that's causing you that. I think they're almost hesitant to look at it that way. They're more reluctant to admit that it may be medications causing you severe problems, and they'd rather ignore it, and you're kind of left in a world, or left in your life to kind of suck it up and just deal with those negative symptoms, no matter how severe or how harsh they may be. But once maybe you get a doctor, or you're with your doctor that's willing to try something else, or willing to try a new medication, it can kind of become this revolving door of trying new medications and having hope and thinking that there will be a better life for you, or an easier way of living, or a more impactful, emotion-filled, joy-filled life, even though you're on a medication that has some negative symptoms. But it's emotional and psychological fatiguing to, not only are you introduced as you have your new identity as a mentally ill person, you are then on a medication that's, maybe it's helping in some ways, maybe it's causing new problems, and then you're looking for a new medication, and another new medication, and another new medication, and it can really drain you psychologically, and it can kind of erode your hope. It can erode your hope for finding a solution and for finding a medication that may truly benefit you long term. And I think a thing that happens for a lot of the world of mental health and psychiatry is that people end up settling. You end up settling for something, or a life that is tolerable enough that you just you throw your hands up in the air and you say, all right, I guess this is my life now. I live with this diagnosis, I live with this mental illness, and I take these medications regardless of the negative side effects that come with them. Because over a long enough time period, you've tried a medication, you've tried another medication, you've tried another medication, and none of them seem to work, or there's so many side effects with them that you go, okay, well, I think this one feels better than that last one, or this one feels better than the first one I ever took, so I'm going to live with these negative side effects regardless of me still wanting a better life, or still feeling that there's more that I could gather or live for. But I'm kind of just, yeah, we settle on this. This is what it is. So, and I think that comes down to a feeling of surviving versus a feeling of living. You're kind of surviving the system. You're surviving your days. You're surviving to get through to the next day, instead of truly living in this world and producing and waking up every day with a passionate, excited mindset to contribute, or work on your interests, work on your hobbies, work on your projects. And instead of that living feeling, it's a survival mode. It's, okay, I'm taking the medications to get through this day, or I'm taking these medications to get through this week. So, and I think a thing that happens is you almost forget you forget that you forget that the side effects happening are there, because you can live with them for so long. Like, initially, if you're taking a new medication and a side effect is there right away and it's very on the forefront of everything going on, but you live with it long enough that maybe it never went away, but it maybe you've learned ways to ignore it so well, or you've pushed it aside in your mind that you no longer think about it. And it's not to say that it isn't there, it isn't impacting your life, but you're no longer thinking about it all the time. And with myself, the medication thing, I'm always looking and I'm always trying to improve my life in any way I can. And the medications is a big factor in bringing in very, very negative symptoms sometimes. But as you, maybe, for example, maybe you get into this world of psychiatry and mental health and you're 20 years old, or maybe younger. I think a lot of younger kids get into this world of being diagnosed, and then they live in the world as well. It could be 14, 15, 16, and they try a medication, and then their life is maybe it's not working, maybe they're not as interested or as joyful or they're not interested in the things that they once were, so they try a new medication. And then that goes on for a year or two, and then you try a new medication, and that goes on for a year or two, and you get to a point where you really just go, is there a medication, or can my life ever truly be joyful or happy? Can I truly get my interest back? Can I truly get this lust for life back that I felt I once had? And the more time that drags on, the more medications you try, it truly weighs on you, and it kind of just chips away at your positive mindset or positive way of thinking that there is a better way of doing this, or potentially a better way to deal and live with the mental illness or the world that you're now in. I think that's very common. I think that's very common for a lot of people, that you finally just say, all right, enough's enough, or I'm not going to keep trying, because it's so difficult. And you may hear this and you may say, okay, yeah, that makes sense, or that's reasonable. But what makes it so much more frustrating and weighs on you so much more is you may be surrounded by people, family members, doctors, that push against trying new medications at all costs. Due to the potential dangers of trying a new medication, or the potential lapse of an episode, or the potential whatever, that they are truly pushing back against trying something new. But they can't recognize, or you can't express fully and truly how impactful or how negative you feel or how hopeless you feel. So you're surrounded by guards. They're guarding you in, they're holding you down, and you're imprisoned to this feeling, this negative feeling, and you really can't do anything. So not only are you imprisoned to this feeling, this negativity, and this hopelessness, you then are fighting against those closest to you and the doctor, the one person who is supposed to be that outlet for help, that last hand reaching out to help you. Even that is pushing against you, saying, no, just stick with this medication, this one works, this is stopping the truly negative feeling or truly negative thing, but it's coming with all these other problems, all these terrible negative side effects, and you're boxed in. You're boxed in, you don't have a voice, maybe you don't have the tools or the right way to proposition a way to the doctor or your family members that, like, hey, I really need out of this. I really need to try something new. And not only do I need to try something new, I need the support, because trying something new and advocating for yourself is hard enough, But then if you're doing it against those closest to you, or the one person, a doctor, who's supposed to be the helping hand in your negative situations, it's a recipe, an accumulation of those around you almost working against you, it feels like at times. So in a long enough timeline of that going on, or trying a new medication and then them resisting, and this may be a specific example, and this may not be the case for everyone, but I would say this probably fits for a lot of people, that they are having negative symptoms and they're hopeless and they're not feeling joy for life or joy for their interests, and they don't know why. They don't know that it may be the medication causing these problems, and trying to advocate for themselves and trying to find a way out of it, against trying to find your way through the forest and get to the other side with the obstacles, and the obstacle of the pressure of your family saying, no, this is what's best for you, and the doctor maybe being reluctant because of some of their fears for more negative outcomes. It's an uphill battle. It is truly an uphill battle, and it's hard to navigate that. Ultimately, what I figured out for myself is going in to the doctor and saying, hey, I have to do this. We have to do this. And not only with the doctor, maybe sometimes even bypassing, and I'm not saying to do this, I'm saying this is what I did, but even bypassing the opinions of the family and the friends and going to the doctor and saying, hey, I can't deal with these negative side effects anymore. I can't deal with no passion for life, no joy for life, no enthusiasm for life or my interests or my hobbies. I'm a shelled, hollowed out version of what I once was, and I think it's due to this medication that I'm on, and having to advocate that for yourself with the doctor and saying, hey, I think this is kind of what we need to do, but I really want your help. I need the expertise of the doctor, your knowledge and wisdom towards these things to try something new. And ultimately, maybe that doesn't happen. That doesn't work. Maybe that doctor is so reluctant against that, and then you go down the process of maybe finding a new doctor, and then there's that whole process of trying to build a new relationship with a new doctor. So it is truly a frustrating process sometimes, and it can be a long, drawn out process, but I think it is worth it to try and live a life and be happier and more hopeful and just more involved and passionate about life and living, that it's worth trying to get over these hurdles and find a medication, or find a cocktail, or find a doctor or people that you can work with that see your vision for what your life could truly look like. But these are some of the problems that kind of go on. It's frustrating. It's truly frustrating. It can weigh you down, and it's weighed me down in the past, even as someone who I think I communicate somewhat well, and I truly am willing to fight against anyone. I'll fight. I'm not literally throwing hands with the doctor or throwing hands with my friends or family, but verbally, or I'll sit down and have the conversations and go against them, even if they say, like, hey, you're staying on medication, you have to stay on this medication, this is your life no matter what. Even against that kind of pressure and that kind of intimidation, sometimes I'm willing to say, I don't think this life I'm living right now, these negative symptoms or this hopelessness, I think there's more that there's more to life than how I feel right now. Life is worth living, not just worth surviving. Life isn't about just survival at all times. Life is worth actually living and finding meaning and joy and love in this world. So I'm someone who can do that and will do that. And even with that mindset and mentality, I have troubles and have had troubles with doctors and family expressing this and trying to, I guess you could say, coach their mentality and try to change their mentality in ways to try to see where I'm coming from. So that's our first topic of the medication journey and kind of the trial and error and some of the fatigue and the fading hope that goes on with it is difficult, but it's not unachievable. I think one of the most important things is communication and trying to find a way to communicate to your family members and doctors however you can. Write down in your journal when you're feeling upset, or when you come across something online, or you come across videos that maybe talk about how you're feeling or some of the things that go on. Clip those and bring those to a doctor. Or we have AIs. You can go to ChatGPT and maybe use a voice command and talk to them and say, hey, these are some of the problems I'm having. How could I relate this to a doctor? I'm not maybe the best or I'm not the best spoken person or the best at communicating, but could you help me get a blueprint to how to communicate with a doctor that maybe I can change my life or change the medication so that I live a more impactful, meaningful, or just a better life in general. So there are tools and there are things that you can do to change your life, because it is your life, and you have to be the captain of your life. You have to steer the boat at times. You can't just solely relate on others or the doctor or the family and friends to always steer the boat for you. Sometimes it's up to you to decide where that goes. So that's going to be our first topic of the medication. And the second topic is I'll talk about some of my own personal experiences, some of the negative. I guess you could say the negative. I should include positives, because there are positives at times. You don't always want to dwell on all the negatives, even though I think it's fun, or I think it's easier to just say, hey, this sucks, this was negative, and point the finger and express the anger and the hatred and the resentment. That sort of thing can be easier at times, but it's very important to include positives as well. So I'm going to talk about my experiences with different medications and what some of them felt like, some of the stories. I'll start with, I guess you could say, one, I think identity. Identity is going to be a huge portion of this show, and identity is going to be a huge portion of what I talk about going on, because it's so important. Your identity of who we are, that is what we bring into the world. When we step into a room, we don't just step in as a person, we step in with our identity, who we identify as, and not only that, who others around us identify us as. For example, growing up, for me, I was an athlete my whole life. I always identified as a hockey player, and that is your core identity. That's like a core belief, a core principle of who you are. And losing an identity, or coming out of high school or college and transitioning into the real world and not being identified as that athlete or whatever sport you played anymore, it's hard to learn to identify as something new and kind of cut ties with that identity. But identity is such a core principle of who we are. Even think about people, they'll be 30, 40, 50 years old, and they'll be wearing their college sweaters because that's who they identify with as a person. That's a core identity of theirs, is that they went to that school. And with mental health, that label, that diagnosis from the DSM-5, whatever it is, that becomes an identity. And not only does it become a identity, I think it becomes the core identity of who we are, is that sometimes even more than we're just a human. It becomes we're the mentally ill human, or we're the person with the mental illness. Just similar to how a person with cancer may just identify as they're a cancer. They have cancer. That's a big identity for them. And I think it's truly a big thing that we need to talk about, and you need to figure out not to solely identify as that, because at the end of the day, you are more than just the mental illness that you have or the mental difficulties that you may have and you may go through. You're a person with emotions, you're a person with experiences, you're a person with problems and hardships, just like any other person. You don't need to walk into a room and go, yeah, I'm the person with the mental illness. Even though the world and the system makes us feel that way at times, I think structuring in your mind that that's not who you are solely is very, very important. And I'll talk about that a lot in the coming episodes, and the entirety of this show and the history of this show is how important identity is, and how important framing and shaping your mentality towards your own identity of who you are. Because you can have a hospital, or you can have a doctor tell you that you have this problem, or this is something wrong with you, and you can say, hey, no, screw you, I'm not that. You can tell me I'm that. Sure, you can write that in your notes and in your book and say that that's what I am and those are the problems I have. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I can decide for myself and say, hey, no, I'm not that person. I'm a human. I'm capable of achieving anything I want. And not only that, I can truly do anything I want. I can identify any way I want in my mind. I can identify as a genius or as a superhero, whatever it is. But you need to tell yourself something beneficial, something positive, not just a identity or a label that has so many negative connotations to it. Because the more that you identify with the label and identify with the negative connotations, the more that will kind of drag you under and drag you into the baggage of that world. So identity is incredibly important. But the second topic here is some of my personal experiences. So you got off on a little side tangent there on identity, but I really want to reinforce how important identity is for people and for yourself in this world, especially if you've been told that you are something and you've been given a label that is a negative thing, to re-identify and restructure your mindset and restructure your life, that's you're more than that. That's not all you are. Maybe that's a little subsect of who you are, but you are far more than just that mentally ill diagnosis. That is not all you are in this world. But I'll talk about a couple different medications. I've been on many medications, different ones, and like I talked about in the first topic, I'm no stranger. I am not fearful of trying new things and advocating to try new things. So that's why I've been on so many. But I'll talk about lithium, I'll talk about olanzapine, and then we will talk about palperidone. We'll talk about those three, which I don't know if any of these are. No. Cephalexin, Depakote. These aren't. I hope you like my little pyramid here. I had more. I could have built a giant pyramid. Maybe I should have. Maybe I should have built a giant medication pyramid here. Really captivate the audience with my structural engineering of the medication bottles. But I'll talk about these medications and some of the side effects and some of the stories that go with them. Because, like I said, in this group I'm in, this PEP group, I think people are very scared. They're very scared to try new medications because you go online and you search, hey, what are some of the side effects of this medication? And you'll see a huge laundry list of this comes up. And then you can go on and you can look for other people's experiences with these drugs, and it'll be negative experience. I had this problem, I had that problem. So it's not the most welcoming thing to go and read about some of these medications and read about some of the problems that may come with them. It's very frightening. It can be daunting at times. So I'll tell some of my stories personally, but even in this group I'm in, other people will talk about medications, and I think they're very weary. There's a truly tense feeling because of what I just listed. And I think rightfully so. I think medications have a bad rap. Again, rightfully so. I think they deserve a bad rap for all of the negative symptoms that they provide, truly. But one of the biggest side effects, so with lithium, this was one of the first ones I was ever on. I think when I was like 18, this was one of the first medications. And I think it has a very suppressive and this goes with almost all like mood stabilizers, most antipsychotics, most medications and antidepressants, but they come with this suppressive feeling of joy in a large, to put it in simplest terms, that you don't have the same joy for life that maybe you once had. You don't have the same emotional vigor for life or for your passions and hobbies and interests. It can almost dilute that or erode it to a sense. But it has this weird thing that you almost aren't truly aware of it. You're not truly aware of how intense it dilutes some of these emotions, because ultimately a medication is you're given a medication because you have some sort of emotional reaction to the world. You're having a negative emotional reaction to the world, and this is in simple plain terms, this isn't for all, but that emotional feeling or that emotional problem you're having, or maybe like a past traumatic problem you're having, doesn't go away simply because you're on the medication. The medication is a dampening and a suppressing form that reduces that noticing of that negative emotion. So with that, it kind of can dampen and erode other things or other interests or other joys. So with the lithium, that was kind of a thing that I noticed, but the biggest one was this urination problem. And I'll read, I mean, that's maybe a little graphic, but I don't care. I'm kind of a shameless person, and I think the more I openly share a lot of these things and talk about some of these things, it will only help others. So if I'm to look a fool, if I'm to have people laugh at me in hopes of empowering others or making others feel more comfortable with the life they have, there's no shame in that. So I'll share the experiences I have. But some common side effects of lithium are increased thirst and urination, mild hand tremors, nausea, diarrhea, and weight gain. Common side effects: increased thirst, hair loss, brain fog, feeling tired or drowsy. Yeah, so these are all common side effects, which most of the side effects for the medications and the antipsychotics and the antidepressants, they're all similar across the board. They kind of hit all. For example, like hand tremors. I mean, mine isn't too bad. On different medications, it's been a lot worse. Or even on the one I'm on currently, it's been a lot worse. But I try to be very cognitive. I try to be very aware of the hand tremors. Kind of because it's embarrassing in a sense. I feel like a little embarrassed if you're out in the world and my hands are like shaky, and someone asks or comments like, hey, your hands are very shaky. Maybe I don't want to truly get into why that is. So it can be embarrassing. Some of the symptoms can cause embarrassment. Like that's a perfect example. But with lithium, what was the one that it said? Let me go back to it. Brain fog. I think brain fog is very, very common amongst these medications. And brain fog is kind of a broad term, but I think it's a lack of sharpness. I notice in myself, because I try to be very aware of how my brain works. I try to note and journal how my brain is interacting with different medications, especially as I lower medication dosage or transfer into new medications. I try to keep a log of how my body and brain are interacting with it so I can come to the world and talk about it. But a lack of sharpness. There's always a lack of, when I'm speaking in particular, that sometimes I'm trying to draw upon certain words and they're not there. Like usually the word will come to you. Almost, you can just grab a word from the ether and it's there and it's the right word. But sometimes I'll be speaking and naturally, or before certain medications or before a certain level of dosage, that would naturally come out in my speaking, in my communication, and I could draw those words without any question, without any struggle. But then on a medication, it may not come out as cleanly. And that can be very, very frustrating. It can be very, very frustrating, and maybe dependent upon what job you have, that can cause problems. I'm doing a speaking show, so it's very frustrating for me sometimes if I want to come across a certain way, or I'm speaking about certain things, and maybe knowledge that I once had, or a way of speaking that I once had, isn't there the way it should be, or isn't there the way I would hope it to be. So that brain fog can be very challenging. But the biggest one with lithium, by far, the biggest one with lithium, let me grab a drink of water real quick here. The biggest one with lithium was this urination problem. And I know it may be graphic, whatever, but whatever, shameless. We're going to talk about it because people have these problems. People live with these problems. And people, I'm people, okay? So this over urination, just constantly having to urinate or pee, and it was hell. It was hell when I was dealing with this, because I go through my mania, I go through my psychosis, I get a label, I'm now dealing with a psychiatrist, and I'm constantly having to pee. And I'm telling, every time I go into the doctor for your constant or your weekly, not your weekly, it's like a monthly, depending on whatever. But I go in for the checkup and I'm saying, hey, I always have to pee. It's a big problem. Like, it's a big problem. And it was to the point, I'm going to share some information here. It was to the point that I had to carry around Gatorade bottles with me because I would have to go so frequently. And as a guy, it's a little easier in the world that we can kind of go wherever. It makes life a little easier as a male in this world with that problem. But even if it was, I couldn't go an hour without having to go pee. Like, if I left my house, I would go right before I left my house, and then wherever I arrived, I was pretty much having to go again. And that was consistent. I would go 15 to 20 times a day, if not more. So living with that a big portion of my energy and my world at that time in my life was figuring out where the closest bathroom was because of this side effect of medication. So that was a very challenging thing to go through, and go and express that to a doctor constantly, and them maybe not giving enough attention or enough care to how big of a problem that was for me. So there's that. That's a side effect and a situation that I dealt with personally. There's olanzapine, which is an antipsychotic that I was on. And like, for example, I said last night that I slept 23 hours on 1.5 of a milligram. At one point, I think I was up to like 20 milligrams of olanzapine to like shut my brain off, to caress my brain, to get my brain in line and slow it a little bit from the mania and how energetic and impulsive it was. Like 20 grams, I think, is a high dosage. But with that, a side effect was this weight gain. I mean, it comes with increased appetite, but ultimately it comes with weight gain because you can't stop eating. You're always hungry, so you're always eating. So there were times that I put on 50, 60 pounds due to a medication, and that's a big problem as well, because you can be a person, you are then thrusted into the psychiatry world, and you're on the medications now, and not only that, you're now 60 pounds heavier and your clothes don't fit and you don't like the way you look anymore. So there's an accumulation of things going on that can really drastically impact your mentality and impact how you look at yourself in a very, very negative way. So that's happened, and then I've lost the weight and gone on another medication, and you blow up again and you gain all that weight back. So it's very difficult, and it's hard to gain so much weight from a medication but continue being on it, especially if you know that it's a medication causing all this weight gain. that you're very fat now, you're very out of shape, and you don't like the way you look, you don't like the way you feel, you don't like how you look at yourself, how you present yourself in the world. So to then have a doctor that's not willing to change a medication with all of that in mind, that's another problem, a very troubling problem that could be. And the last one I'll talk about is palperidone, which this was truly the worst medication I have ever been on in my entire life. And this is personal experience. You do what you want with what your doctor tells you and your medications. This isn't advice. This is personal experience. This is personal testimony. But this palperidone medication I was put on at one point was the worst thing, or one of the worst things I've ever experienced or lived through, because it was binding. It was mind binding, body binding. I was truly, there's a word for it called akathisia, that you feel trapped in your body, that you can't move how you want to move, and you can't do the things you want to do. And I was on this medication, and this was happening to me. You're drooling. I'm drooling on myself. My speech isn't proper. The way I walk, I'm walking slow, I'm moving slow. And I didn't find out a lot of these things until after I was off the medication, and some of my family and friends told me how slow I was talking, how slow I was walking. And it was kind of sad, and it bothered me a lot afterwards to know that that's how I was portraying myself to the world. And not that it matters like how I was coming across in the world, but more so that I wasn't aware of how jumbled my speech was, or how impacted my movement was. It was so to the point that I wasn't even aware of it, and I'm living in this world. I'm walking around this world. So that was very frustrating to be on a medication that did that to me. And it was also came with this like very intense feeling of my spine and the back of my neck, that it was, I would lay in bed at night, and I'd lay on my back, and I'd try and roll over to my side, and it was like excruciating pain to try to move. So that was another thing with that medication that was terrible. And this segment here isn't to say that all medications are bad, or that all medications will do these terrible things to you, but I'm just sharing some of my experience and some of the difficulties that come with this world. I'm going to share personal stories. I'm going to share personal experiences. So, yeah. And that one, I had to kind of fight my way to get off of that medication, the palperidone, myself. I had to scream in pain, and I kind of told someone in my family, like, hey, take me to the hospital. I need to go to emerge. No matter what, I need to get off of this medication. I'm in so much pain and so much discomfort that this isn't it. This isn't it. Can't be it. So these are some of the internal conflicts, or the conflicts that go on with medications, or asking yourself when you're on a medication, is this helping me? Is this hurting me? Is this doing more harm than it is doing good? Is it suppressing some of my joys in life? Am I less passionate towards my interests? And even I'll be honest here with you guys. I'm always honest, but I guess I'll be even more honest with another story, that I was on a medication. I think it was recently. I don't know. It might be the one I'm on now, but a much higher dose. Maybe something along those lines. But there was a lack of empathy and a lack of emotional connection to those closest to me. And what do I mean by that is that there was truly a lack of emotional connection with some of my parents, my loved ones, my girlfriend, my partner, some of my friends, that it was almost like this lack of like care, that I don't care about them. I don't care what happens to them, on like a very like emotional, deep level, that there was truly no connection at all. And I truly believe that is from medication. So to have something like that happen, that I had no joy towards them or being around them, or no joy or care, no emotional connection to them, or no emotional joy for the things that I once truly loved, that was pretty hard. But it was hard to figure out that it was medication causing that, because we have this obviously instinctual love for our parents and whatever. So to have that severed, that cord and that connection severed, and then trying to figure out, why do I feel this way? Why do I not enjoy listening to any music? Why do I not enjoy any of my hobbies? Why do I not enjoy being around the people that I once always wanted to be around? So figuring out that and reflecting on that and kind of coming to the conclusion that, hey, this might be the medication, and then solving that issue it's kind of sad. And it's kind of sad to think about. And this will kind of lead this into the next topic here in a second. But I think medication can cause this lack of empathy and this lack of emotion towards family members or towards people, that can then cause severe, tragic scenarios to play out in this world. But we will get in, with that being said, I guess we'll get into the third topic here, is the bigger picture and how medication fits into power, political influence, how it fits into system, the structural system of mental health, and how it fits into human dignity and how it impacts humans in multiple different fields of the world. I will cover. Sorry, I have some notes here. I'm trying to be good at just going off the cuff and talking, but it's hard to kind of read some of the notes and just talk freely at the same time. But I'll talk about how medication at times, I think, is used to manage behavior. It's used to manage behavior, and this is kind of a concept that I've been thinking about and really working on. And I almost had this awakening to this thought, is that why so many people are medicated in today's world is to kind of group us in to the sea of fish. Like the school of fish that's swimming one direction, we want everyone in that school of fish. We want everyone in line. We want everyone in the program. We don't want outcasts all over raising noise and causing so many problems for humanity and for the current structure of society. So the more we can get people to fit in line with a certain way of thinking or the certain way of behaving, is kind of better. And this is kind of a large overarching view of things, and maybe you could say conspiratorial mindset, but I'm no stranger to a fun conspiracy. I think we all enjoy a fun conspiracy. But it's kind of the industrialization of our world, that you work the 9 to 5, it's products, it's production, it's quotas, it's how much value can you provide for a company. So it's kind of, even if you're having some spiritual problems or emotional problems on a deeper level, and you go and you see a doctor, you see a psychiatrist, and you're given a medication that can then maybe suppress that spiritual thing or suppress that emotional thing, that gets you then back in line at your job, or gets you back in line to the world of how the world works. I think that's really used. I truly believe that's kind of why so many people are medicated, because I don't think our world is set up on a human basis of what's best for the natural way of living for humans. Even in the last, I would say, probably 200 to 300 centuries, we've got so far out of the norm of the hunter-gatherer, of the farmers, of being out in the farm fields, or just going outside and being in nature, collecting whatever food for your family, and hunting, and this type of living. More of a primitive, more natural way of living that we've always had for the majority of humanity. We've gone into this cubicle, 9 to 5, industrialized, quotas, profits, work, commute, be in our own little compartmentalized car, be in traffic, noise, music always on, always TV stimulation on, always news stimulation on. We've alienated ourselves to kind of who we once were as a race. And I think that's been so traumatic to us as humans on a very deeper level, on a spiritual level. kind of like our roots of who we are is we're so foreign. We're foreign in our own bodies. We're foreign in our own minds. We're foreign in our own society. And it's a very, very large scale that this is going on. So I think that's kind of why so many people are on medications, is because we have this intuitive feeling that things are wrong. We have this intuitive feeling that maybe this job isn't for me, or maybe what I'm doing in this world isn't for me, or maybe what I'm seeing happening in the world, or these problems, or these wars, or whatever it is. We have this intuitive feeling that it's very, very wrong, but we don't know how to express that. We don't know how to communicate that. So then it comes out in certain emotions. It comes out in depression and anxieties and sadness. And to deal with that is you get medicated, and then you suppress those emotions. You suppress the anxieties, the depressions even more. It's instead of solving and figuring out the problems, we've turned to suppression and ignorance and ignoring kind of what goes on. And I think that's kind of a tool that medication is being used as. And even a smaller example of this is if you look at in prisons, for example, in large prisons, they use medications, antipsychotics, to kind of sterilize a lot of the inmates. It's a sterilization. I don't know if sterilize is the right word. I think sterilize is. But it's a chemical neutering. It's a neutering of the mind, in a sense, a chemical castrating effect that you're less aggressive, you're less emotional, you're less purpose-driven, you're less masculine. It's kind of, it dulls the testosterone, it mutes those impulses, that innate feeling of getting up, that revolutionary spirit, or that primal spirit to fight and be masculine or be confrontational, which I think a lot of people who end up getting incarcerated and imprisoned have this abundance of. And that's why they create things or do things that end up finding themselves in these places. But I think, or not that I think, I know that's also a tool that these establishments use, is medicating people once they're then imprisoned, so then they are a little more docile. They're a little more dull, a little more zombie-like, to not cause as many problems. And I think that they've taken that from, they see it works in prisons, and then it's utilized in many other places. And I think that's why medication is being so heavily pushed on younger and younger kids. You see more kids in schools being medicated with the ADHD claim because they can't sit still in a classroom. So one kid that can't sit still, who has all this energy, or who isn't interested in learning about whatever bullshit's on the board for that day, is then taken to a doctor and put on the medications to then, they'll then sit nicely and quietly in class and not be so much of a nuisance. So it's kind of it's a way of herding the cows, herding the cattle into a line or into the pen that kind of fits all, that society goes the same direction. And this has happened in a bunch of different areas, like I just said, school, prisons, and I think even a large section of just people who get the mentally ill label for different things, who are maybe more passionate or more emotional or have these outbursts. They are then prescribed the medications to be herded into the pen, the cattle. Herd the cattle. That's maybe a conspiratorial lens. That may be, but do I think there is genuine truth in that? Yes. I don't think that's ultimately very arguable if you look at some of the facts of what goes on. But let me read a couple of my notes here. So there's a difference between, like I said, or how I talked about some of these examples, but it's a difference between medication as healing versus medication as control. Because if you have a problem, and I think a lot of people with mental illness or people with the mental health issues, I think it's more of a spiritual problem. I think it's more of a thing that's intuitively they know something's wrong with the way they're living their lives, or something they know intuitively is wrong with the world that they don't know how to express. And it builds and it builds and it builds, and it kind of bursts at a point, or it can become anxiety or depression. However that spiritual problem manifests, or that intuitive knowing, however it manifests in the world, the medication is, it's more of the control mechanism rather than used to solve and figure out the spiritual or intuitive feeling that's going on. It's more of a clasping or a binding, a chaining of the problems instead of working and figuring out the problems. It's almost just an easy solution. It's easier to just strap on or throw on the prescriptions, to throw these at you, to hand these out like candy and say, here's your solution. Everyone gets one. You get one, and you get one, and the kid gets one, and the 5th graders get one. Everyone gets one. This is the solution to all our worldly humanity's problems, is the little pill in a bottle. It'll fix you up real good. It's kind of the ultimate solution to everything is looked at the lens of this. If you're feeling sad, if you're feeling a little emotional, maybe a little depressed or down on your luck, I know the thing that will get you feeling right. It's one easy step. You just pop the lid, just a quick push and a twist, just like that. Pop the lid open, chuck a pill in your mouth, and swallow with some water. And just like that, you'll be feeling like $1,000,000. Just like that. I could be a salesman, huh? Get me on the TV. Oh wait, I'm already on it. But it's kind of, I don't know what that was. But yeah, it's kind of just like an easy solution to all of our problems, instead of, because I think we'd rather ignore our problems than solve them truly. If we have a problem, if we have a spiritual problem, if we have a problem with maybe our job or how our life turned out, instead of sitting with that pain, sitting with that discomfort of reflection and analyzing, hey, why did my life end up that I'm not happy with what I'm doing every day? Or how did my life end up that I want to take drugs, or I need to suppress my feelings and emotions with drugs and certain things? And then instead of trying to do things that are maybe better to solve that, we turn to the medications, and the medications are handed out so easily and so frequently to solve those problems. It's kind of disgusting, and I don't like it. And we're gonna put an end to it. We're gonna put an end to it. What else do we have here? But yeah, I think the conversation around medication kind of needs a reform, not removal in its entirety. I'm not here to say that medication is the end all be all, or medication is the demonic entity. I think medication truly is a great revolutionary thing that humans came up with, and I think it has a ton of great value and a ton of great impacts for a lot of people. A lot of people truly need it, and it does better the lives of a lot of people. But I think we're far past the point in which how much it's needed and how easily it's being looked at as the solution for a lot of things. Medication is just left, right, and center solution. This is the solution. This is the solution. So I think that conversation of ultimately why is that happening, which I kind of gave a couple of reasons of why I think that happens, as well as way in which we can then change the conversation and change and reform that we it's also, there's such a money, you want to talk about big pharma, you want to talk about conspiracies, talk about the amount of money big pharma makes, and the incentivizations, the incentives that doctors get, the incentives that these drug reps get, the incentives that are given to everyone to push these. So the more people are being incentivized to push the medications, the more obviously they're gonna push the damn medications. If they're given money, like, hey, if you get 100 people on medication this year, you'll get an extra 50 grand or whatever it is, however it looks like. It may not even be money. It may be like, hey, if you get 100 people on medication this year, we'll give you a seat on this board, or we'll give you a platform, or we'll get you your foot in the door at this thing, or whatever it is, whatever you're interested in. I think a lot of that goes on, and I think it's disgusting. I think it's disturbing. So yeah, those were some of the topics we hit on. The bigger picture of how medication fits into power systems and human dignity. I talked about a lot of my personal experiences with medication. I gave some examples, some shameless examples, you could say. And we talked about the medication journey, some trial and error, and some of the fatigue that causes over time, kind of weighs you down, and that you almost give up over time, and you say, all right, I've had enough, I'm just going to give up and succumb to taking this medication, rather than keep fighting for a better life or fighting for a better way of living. So, those are some topics we hit on today. I was very nervous to do the show today. I don't know why. Maybe partly because I just wasn't super energized waking up out of that 23-hour slumber and trying to get some energy for the show. Even I don't think I was as energetic as I maybe once I usually am doing the show, but I was sleeping 23 hours I was wild. I mean, I woke up for maybe like an hour, went up, got some couple swig of apple juice, and then back to bed. 23 hours. It was needed. The last week or so, or last like 5 or 6 days, I'll stay up for maybe like 24 to 30 hours, and then I'll sleep for 23 hours. My sleeping schedule is on an interesting trajectory right now, so I need to work on getting that a little back in line. But yeah, I think that was a good episode. Also, one thing that was interesting that last night, as I sat down and I started meditating, and usually when I meditate, whatever comes to mind, or whatever my thoughts are really, or whatever my brain is really focused on, is kind of, I think, obviously is what I'm interested at the time, but it's kind of what all of my attention and focus is going on. Because when I sit down to meditate and I just witness the thoughts, you can really see what your brain is thinking about. And I did this big speech in my mind about like medication, and it went on for a while. It probably went on for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and I like sat there, I got my eyes closed. I'm obviously my Buddha, got the Buddha vibe on, and the speech is going on and playing out in my mind. And after it was finished, like I let it happen. And meditate, you let the thoughts happen, whatever. You kind of just watch them. You're not trying to just suppress the thoughts, but you're noticing them. You're seeing what's going on. And I was like, okay, I gotta come on the show and I gotta do that speech. But I don't know. It was like, maybe if I start talking about what it is, I'll get into it. It's like, we've had enough of being suppressed. The authoritarian regime of psychiatry, putting the boot on the necks of us. I'm not going to do it. And it needs to be authentic. When I do a passionate or truly enthusiastic speech about something, you can't force it. You can't force it. It has to be genuine, and it has to flow. Just like this show. I have a couple notes, pull up some notes on the show, and then we try to just flow. Try to just flow. Hey mate, I really love your stream. Enjoy being part of your fan community. Be mine. I should post my Esther. Is this viewer Esther? Are you still in here? I'll post my Discord. You can join. I should remember to do that. Post my Discord. Or I think you can go on my channels. You can see my Discords up there if anyone wants to join. Oh, oh, be my guest. I don't know what's going on with let me see if it'll work right now, and then I'll stay live and I'll go do some other stuff. But my OBS is giving me some problems right now. So give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Yeah, okay, it's not gonna work. Whatever. OBS was being difficult today. Oh, well, what do you do? Is there any topics? Any topics you want me to talk about? I think medication was a good one. Although I will, obviously I'll talk about medication lots of times because everyone's drugged up these days. Everyone's a walking zombie. Everyone's drugged up on pills. Oh, and another thing I was going to talk about is, like, obviously the impact of, like, school shooters all being on antidepressants. Is there a correlation with that? Yeah, probably. And I mean, I talked about not feeling an emotional connection to people being on medications, or not having the emotional connection to my family and friends and girlfriend, and just, like, not caring what happens to them, or, like, not wanting to be around them. So if I can notice that that's a thing for school shooters, if they're on these medications and then they go and, like, shoot up schools, I think there's probably some sort of connection there. I don't think that's a conspiracy. Probably we should look at that and maybe stop that whole thing, even though I'm not American, I'm Canadian. The whole school shooting thing, huh? It's sad. It's sad. And it's sad that there's not a huge willingness to try to get people off of medication. And I do think some people need to get on medication. I do think some people need to stay on medication. Do I think they need to be on huge cocktails that they're on? Or do I think that adding medication and adding medication and adding new medications is the solution for some of the problems? No, I don't think that is the solution. Do I think increasing and upping the dosage constantly is the solution for people's problems? No. So, and also with me, with my own personal stuff, I'm only on one medication, and I lowered it not long ago, and then I had some, like, problems. But I think I have problems right now because I'm still pretty young. I mean, I'm not in puberty still, I'm 25. But I think the younger you are, the more impulse you are, like the more impulsivity there is kind of to do things maybe out of character or more emotional things. Because with age comes kind of more reasoning, more stability in life, more knowledge, more wisdom. So I do think it'll probably take me more years before I try to potentially taper off of the medication I'm on. I just think I'm probably a little too young right now. There's too much rage. There's too much rage and vigor in my loins that if I try to come off, it'll just burst to the surface. I have the example or the metaphor I'll give is that kurama. The kurama inside of me is it's a little too strong. He comes out in full rage and full rampage when I lower the medication. So maybe as I grow older and I learn to work with kurama and learn to interact with kurama a little better, that we can one day taper off the medication, and Kurama and I, and if you don't know who Kurama is, go watch Naruto. You'll know who Kurama is. Kurama is inside me, and he's waiting He's waiting for his chance in the light, but I need to be in full control. Just as Naruto spends years working with that inner demon, I need to do the same. Is kind of how I look at it. And I like myth making. I think it just, when you can make stories out of your life, when you can make myths out of your life, it lessens anxiety around things. I think it lessens kind of trauma around things. For example, when I think about some of the times I spent in psych wards and some of the things I did, some of the behaviors, and you can look back at that and you can be like very shameful, you can be like embarrassed or disgusted, or oftentimes I think people don't even want to think about it because there's so much trauma or there's so much disdain for some of the things they did or the person they were at that time, that you just block out. You block it out. You don't want to acknowledge that it's even there. And I'd rather create a story in my mind or create a mythology out of what happened that can benefit me, rather than every time a thought comes up or every time I walk into a hospital that I'm reminded of these stories or reminded of these times, instead of being pulled back into a negative, traumatic situation. I have this like story that I draw on, and this story that I build. It's kind of like a mythology, and I use animes to do that. I think animes are really good at building mythology and building character arcs, because ultimately we are the designer, we are the creator of our own lives. So if you can, not only in the world, how you portray yourself to others or how you walk around and how your life plays out in the physical reality of the world, but also in your inner world, you can create your own story. And whether you say this is like delusional, like schizophrenic thinking, like whatever, I don't care, it works. But if you can build your own mythology of your life and think about these hardships that you went through, or think about these negative times or these negative experiences, and look at them as like, oh, that was me building, that was me gaining more confidence and gaining more experience in this world, and like kind of building your own character, building that inner strength of your own character, and you take it and you carry that with you. And I think someone talks about this, I think it was like Joe Rogan, he says like, picture yourself as the main character in your story. And or he said like ignore that. He said live your life as if there's a film crew following you around your day-to-day life, and act and live your life as if there's a film crew. And where you are right now in your life is like the beginning of the story of that documentary, and you're gonna live the life, you're gonna have it filmed, and obviously there's gonna be hard times, there's gonna be embarrassing times, there's gonna be failures, there's gonna be tears, there's gonna be victories. All of those are gonna be in the documentary. But the more aware you are kind of that like, I guess you could say like being like a main character in your world, or knowing that it may impact someone else's world or impact something better than just like who you are, or have some sort of impact because it's being documented, is like, do that internally as well. Think about your life internally as well, like as a kid, some of those hardships, or teenage years, think about those hardships and be like, okay, those were stepping stones, those were myth making. You had to go through them to become the stronger person, or you had to go through those to gain the wisdom and gain the knowledge. It's not like they just happened and then don't take anything from them. It's like, no, take and reflect and look at the most negative parts of your life, the most negative things that you've ever gone through, and say like, those were good. That's good that it happened. It's only bad if you don't take anything from it. The worst things that happen to you are only the worst things, and only bad if you decide not to take anything good from them. But if you can take some sort of narrative and you can build some sort of narrative and you can add some sort of character to you or some sort of whatever it is, you guys understand what I'm saying. But take those stories, take the hardships, whether that's laying on the floor, being locked in the room of a psych ward, being strapped to a bed in a psych ward and being injected with needles and going like, I mean, this is for me personally, but look at that and go like, okay, look at that hardship. Look at where I was. Look at what I came out of, that I can come and I can sit here and draw upon that story to tell that you can gain strength, you can gain some wisdom, some knowledge from these stories. You have to with everything in your life. They're not always just negative things. Although they may seem at the time that it's just a negative thing, there are always positives to draw on, and it may take time to draw on those positives. It may take time to gather the knowledge and wisdom, but it is what we have to do. It is what we have to do. Okay, let's go on Reddit. I'm going to go on Reddit, and I'm going to read some Reddit threads. I don't think I can share my screen right now because OBS was causing me some problems, but I'll read some of the threads anyways, because why not? Let's go to... Actually, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. I think this was a good show. I've been up for an hour and a half. So I should do a little closing statement and get out of here. A little closing statement and get out of here. Okay, so that was today's episode of Be My Guest. I think we touched on a lot of good things here. Touched on, obviously, a big topic, will be a big reoccurring topic, is medication, as well as identity, talking about how important framing your identity is and framing past traumas. I mean, I talked about that a little bit at the end. I should get into that. That's a good topic, is how you frame stories and how you frame and think about past experiences. But that is going to be the episode. I do this live, so if you're seeing this, I'm usually live on Twitch, Rumble, and Kick. My handles are Eric B. Guest, or I don't know what my handles are. Look at the links in my description of my page. But yeah, that's the show. Leave a follow, leave a comment, let me know any questions, any topics you ever want me to talk about. I'm always looking for topics to talk about or topics people want to hear about. So feel free to leave a comment where I can improve what you didn't like, whatever. Leave a follow, leave a subscription, and have a great day. Thank you for watching. Bye, guys.